Today, we're going to explore the physiological differences between men and women, a topic which is called sexual dimorphism. It may not seem like it, but this is an unresolved topic in biology which dates back millennia, and it has important implications on areas of our lives like sociology, engineering, ergonomics, and even pharmaceutical drug development. I'm Professor Sunny, and thanks for joining me as I start asking questions. It was back in the 2nd century that the famous anatomist Galen of Pergamum first described the prostate. In fact, there's now an AI tool named after Galen that helps to analyze medical images of prostates for signs of cancer. But it wasn't until about 1400 years later that Falloppio was credited with identifying the uterine tubes, or as we call them, the fallopian tubes. We're still finding out new things about the human body today. Recently, an article was published concluding that male humans have been evolving over the past decades to become taller. The article is titled, "The Sexy and Formidable Male Body." Clearly a highly scientific title without any hint of preconceived bias. It goes on, men's height and weight are condition-dependent, sexually selected traits. The authors and publishers must have been so excited about this paper that they didn't even have time to spell check the title. So we're off to a good start. But before we start talking about the conclusions, we need to take a look at the data they used to reach those conclusions. This article lists 3 sources of data. The first source of data is self-reported height and weight in a database of about 135,000 participants, which was maintained by the World Health Organization. Now, self-reported means each participant simply told someone how tall they were and how much they weighed. And of course, no one's ever lied about their height or weight, right? So this so-called data is about as trustworthy as what you get from a dating app. Also, there's no actual link to the data used, so we can't even look at it for ourselves. The authors do link to citation 15 in the introduction when mentioning this World Health Organization data, but when you go to the reference section, that links to an article about childhood shunting, and nothing on the World Health Organization appears to be in the reference list at all. The second source of data is listed as Wikipedia. Now, we all know Wikipedia is a perfectly reliable and a primary data source, right? Well, the standard way of aggregating data across studies is to perform what's called a systematic review of the literature. To do this, you use a cultivated database, such as PubMed, and you type in specific and well-selected groups of words as a search prompt. Every article that appears is then reviewed and the data combined if the methods align from the different studies. Here, they just pulled the average height data off of the Wikipedia page. Can I suggest that maybe next time they try Reddit? Now third, we have a study published in 1999 which used data from 2 birth cohorts, 1946 and 1958. Unfortunately, I can't personally access this data because it is behind a paywall. That's right, science is a money-making business, and publishers force universities and individuals to pay to be able to view scientific articles. Now, I have lots of questions about how height and weight are determined in any study. Clearly, one person could not have measured the heights and weights of over 180,000 people around the world over an 80-year period using the exact same methods with the exact same carefully calibrated scale. So there are going to be different amounts of error in each individual measurement. When weighing people or measuring their height, did everyone take off their shoes, for instance? If not, did the person recording the weight and the height guess how much to take off for the shoes? Or were the measurements recorded without adjusting for their shoes? What about their clothing? In different places and cultures and weather conditions, I wear different clothes. If it's cold, I add layers. If it's warm, maybe I wear sandals instead of boots. We can't know what happened in this study because the methods aren't recorded in that much detail. It is known that in Western developed cultures, they tend to conform to the sexual preference of taller men and shorter women. But other cultures don't. Maybe there were cultural influences, especially on height, that skewed the self-reported data in this study. As an example, maybe the men systematically tried to stand up straighter than the women, and maybe the women allowed themselves to slouch down a little shorter when measured. I know that my height can change by several inches between slouching or straightening and lengthening my spine. In fact, this study on the sexually formidable male body showed that in more developed countries, The largest mean difference in height between men and women was around 15 centimeters, or 6 inches. Could it be possible that the average man in this developed region was able to lengthen his spine by 3 inches, while the average woman allowed herself to slouch down by 3 inches, maybe even subconsciously, to conform to cultural preferences? We'll never know, because the methods used in this study were not systematically presented, and they don't appear to be stringently controlling for cultural norms. The great thing about scientific results is that you don't have to believe them. You can independently reproduce them for yourself, at least hypothetically. But to do that, you need to have the original data, and you need to know the detailed methods of the study or the experiment. When research is published without enough information on the systematic methods, the controls, the variables, and the unintended variables that couldn't be controlled, then it can't be reproduced. And then, is it even science, or is it closer to a really complex story about the size of the fish that you caught? The driving factors for academic researchers are simply to publish as many papers as they possibly can, because promotion often depends on quantity, and because publishers are paid thousands of dollars for each article that is successfully published. In science, each area moves at a different pace, so standard measures for what should be considered successful publishing often don't apply for researchers that share a hallway. And while the peer review process is the best there seems to be for evaluating science, the reviewers may have different motivations when evaluating manuscripts, which means some worthy research never gets published, while some vague or poorly controlled research makes it all the way into the latest news cycle. In the end, please don't believe science, understand it. The key to understanding any science is understanding the detailed methods that were used to get the results. So please, keep asking questions. And thanks for watching. Are you a researcher that wants to make your study bulletproof? Do you want somebody to critically evaluate your scientific writing or to develop your latest grant proposal? Maybe you're a journalist and you want to do more than create a click-worthy headline. Or maybe you're a business leader that wants to find out if you can make your processes more efficient. If so, let me know. I have nearly 2 decades of experience across program management, process development, market research, scientific writing, and consulting. And I enjoy applying scientific and diagnostic thinking to hard problems. And if you just enjoy hearing how science works, then please like and subscribe.